Okay. Hello, team. Welcome to another Shopper Intelligence live webinar and part 2 today of our Australian grocery series with our very good friends at the AFGC. Good morning to all of you early birds. Good morning, good afternoon even to all of you early birds. Adelaide, Melbourne, Victoria, it's great to have you with us today. My name is David Shukri and it's great to be back. We've had a break of a few weeks since our last session. How are you doing? Are you good? Are you well? Give us a thumbs up in the chat if you're good, having a good week. Maybe a double thumbs up if it's a great week. One or two little changes that you might have noticed since last time. New platform, not least of which you're all, I'm sure, very familiar with Zoom. So that should feel very comfortable. Fiona's given us a thumbs up. Thank you very much. So that should feel very comfortable. And look, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to you for bearing with us when we had shall we say one or two little technical problems last time. It was one of those days. So terrific to have you here today. Now then, what is today all about? Well, last time you'll recall we heard about the growth challenge laid down by the AFGC. We're going to hear more on that today from Sam in a moment or two. And we spoke about the underlying shopper trends that have emerged through the pandemic. Today, we're going to get more specific. We're going to hone in on one critical area of change in shopper behaviours that poses both a risk if you ignore it, but also significant opportunity for reward for food and grocery businesses if you embrace it and take advantage of it now. We're talking, of course, about the occasion and the mindset behaviours that Australian shoppers are exhibiting today. Buying for specific needs, what that means in terms of what's going on in shoppers' heads and what that then translates into if you're a supplier or a retailer looking for growth, which I imagine is pretty much every one of you out there today watching this session. Before we go any further, tell me please where you sit on this topic. Nice, easy one to kick things off today. I'm just going to launch a poll here for you, and it goes something like this. Where do occasions and mindsets in shoppers sit in your thinking today? Okay, very simple. 4 options. Not really on my radar. Option 2 is thinking about it, but kind of thinking it's more relevant for other categories, not something for us. Option 3, starting to give it some thought. We're starting to consider this as a topic of conversation. Or number 4, which is looking popular at the moment, we're on it. It's embedded in the business, it's something we talk about, and it's an extra string to our bow. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Get involved from the off, and we'll come back on that in a moment and see what the mood is, what the general sentiment is. Our promise, of course, today, as it always is for all of our sessions, is that you will leave here in about 40-45 minutes time with some real, tangible, practical ideas that you can take away and do something with your teams in your business from tomorrow. Stay involved through the chat. From the Shopper Intelligence team, I know we've got a whole bunch of people. We've got Nancy, we've got Nick, I think we've got Andrew, we've got Ming. Say hello, guys. Let everyone know you're out there. They'll be keeping an eye on the chat, on things there, furnishing you with answers, furnishing you with little bits and pieces of added value. And if you want to take anything off, of course, you know, in Zoom, you can talk direct to any of us. If you want to go into a little bit more detail, you want to talk about something a little bit more specific, then you can do that as well. Last but not least, from a housekeeping point of view, yes, you will definitely get access to this recording, and it will be on Tuesday next week. So definitely you will get access to recording. It'll be Tuesday next week. And of course, you probably know by now that we eventually upload them all to our YouTube channel as well. So in a moment, we're going to catch up with our guest speakers for today, and then we'll get stuck in. And here's what that looks like. Executing to the mindset of your shopper. That's what today is all about. And then in the second bullet, Simon's going to move into really why this isn't a theoretical hypothesis. This isn't a theoretical domain that we've dreamt up as researchers, but it's a material avenue for growth. And he's going to explain why in the second part. And then in the third part of today's session today, he's going to give you some very specific ideas and pointers using a real case study that outlines a 3-step process you can use to identify and leverage the mindset thinking in your category. So those are the 3 points for today. Remember, last time I offered you the chance to get some very specific themes around your category. So it was 3 big trends, I think was how we positioned it. 3 big trends in your category. Lots of you took up on that. Lots of you had a chat with Nick. I hope you got a lot of good value out of that and something you can leverage with your trading partners. Similar opportunity today to help you understand this ecosystem of categories that sit around yours when shoppers are in this occasion mindset. Keep that in your mind. We'll come back to that, excuse me, later on in the session. And we will wrap up, of course, with your questions and some more thoughts from Simon and Sam towards the end. Closing out, as I say, in about 40 minutes time. Sound good? What you came for? I hope so. Give us another thumbs up if you're on board with today's agenda. And well, we'll crack on. We'll keep going. I can't see them, but I can hear them. Sam and Simon are there. Guys, hello.
Hello, we are here.
You are there. You're underneath my chat box. That's why I can't see you.
Afternoon.
Hello, Sam. We'll come to you in a moment. Sam, first of all, Simon, MD of Shopper Intelligence. You've been, well, first of all, I should ask you, how are you doing? Are you doing well?
Doing well, David. Thank you.
Good.
Very kind of you to ask.
It's been so long since I've seen you. I know you've been very busy. What's the post-lockdown mood been from your perspective when you've been out in the industry over the last few weeks?
Been out virtually in the industry still quite a lot. Yeah, look, it's good. Following on from the last webinar, obviously we talked a lot about the enormous change we've seen in market, trusted quality, great story for brands that have strong heritage, strong authenticity, talk about health and sustainability. I think what I've really noticed in the last few weeks is some great conversations and the importance of looking at that at category level. So David just mentioned it, the chats we've had with specific companies, suppliers, retailers around specific categories. And there's big variation in terms of what those trends look like at category level. And one example that springs to mind is talking to a home care company and talking about toilet cleaners and dishwashing products. And they were complete polar opposites in terms of the trends that we see. And so, you know, it's not enough just to say, oh, here's a big macro trend and let's plug that in, or even here's a department and assumption that it all behaves the same way. So big differences at category level, big changes post-COVID and some good pivots and good new thinking happening from supply community.
Nice. More from you in a moment, Simon. We'll keep going with that vein of thinking in terms of getting specific and getting underneath the headlines. Sam, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, David.
Good. I know
Pleased
you've been busy.
Here.
Yes, I know you've been busy. I know you're preparing for board meetings, and we were talking in rehearsal about some of the big industry challenges you're working on right now. It's obviously a busy time coming up to Christmas. I was just going to ask you how you feeling in terms of how the industry is set for peak trading, given pallet issues and freight issues and whatnot.
Yeah. And I'm sure that everyone on the call is living and breathing through these issues on a daily basis. Look, I think that the one thing that the last 2 or so years has really shown us is the resilience of the industry and the sector. You know, there is no other sector, I don't think, that has really risen to the challenge of being able to continue to supply food and grocery, you know, the essentials to Australians every day of the year, and done that in a way which has really limited impact, negative impact for consumers. So something really to be proud of for our sector. I think it also goes to the evolving nature of the FMCG sector. It's certainly true that it's one that doesn't stay still. It's always changing and evolving. And I think we're going to see some of that new thinking coming through from Simon in today's call. But specifically on the points that you raised, supply chains are under pressure. But supply chains are really, really clever at being able to move, obviously move product, but to move and change and be nimble in their approach. So whilst I think it's a difficult period for them in this lead up to our heavy demand, I'm sure that they will be very successful in achieving the outcomes and getting product through to consumers.
To be fair, Christmas has never been an easy time for supply chain. I started my food and grocery career in supply chain many years ago, and it was hard. It was hard graft, but you're right around the resilience and the point you make about the sense that Australian food businesses have risen to the challenge over the last couple of years has definitely come out in our research when we look at satisfaction levels. And that's maybe I use that as a segue, Sam, into what you broached with us last time, and I'll flash this one up for you now in terms of, well, what do we need to do to keep going and to keep this momentum, eh?
Yeah. Thanks, David. You may remember last time I spoke to the attendees around a report that the AFGC had launched in May. It's Sustaining Australia Food and Grocery Manufacturing 2030. And in this, we set out a bit of a framework for the industry. In thinking of today's topic and what we're going to be talking around, it struck me that what we really, and you know, that's all around brand and category and outcomes and value and growth. But to be able to do those things effectively, we need to have the appropriate innovation cycles and the appropriate investment into the sector. So what I'd like to do is take you all through a couple of slides. There's only 4 charts, so it's not heavy, not really heavy, just to explain from our perspective, which is at the industry level, what we're seeing happening with innovation and investment. And this, I think, will lead really nicely into the work that Simon's going to be talking to you about in terms of those occasions and the mindset shift that we need to adopt. So I think it's true to say that innovation, whether it be product, process or plant, is really the lifeblood of the FMCG sector. And it's also true to say that our success comes from meeting the needs of shoppers and consumers, but not just their needs, their wants and their desires as well. However, at an industry level, we face some challenges in doing this and being able to deliver on that promise. So what we're looking at here is a chart that is outlining capital investment in Australia as measured by the Australian Bureau of Statistics for food and grocery manufacturers. It doesn't include grocery, so my apology to anyone who works in that space. And what we can see here is that investment has been moving sideways really for the last 5 years at just under 3 billion per year. This really talks in our mind to the sector not significantly growing in productive capacity, whether that be a range of issues that you would use in capital investment for. So if we move now to the next page, David, what we're going to look at now is R&D. So really drilling down into that innovation piece. I think it's true to say there's no lack of desire to innovate within Australia, within FMCG companies, so that's absolutely true. And as I said, innovation has always been a strength of the sectors. And in actual fact, Australia was for many years an innovation hub globally, where products would be tested here in this market first before moving offshore. But things have changed. The slide on your left-hand side is looking at the R&D, the research and development spending in Australia. The one on the right-hand side is looking at global. And there's a stark difference between the two, with one decreasing and one increasing in terms of spend. Australia had a growth trajectory up to 2013-14, but since then we've been in decline in that spending dollar. We're now at about the same levels of spend as we were in 2009, 2010. And this is very similar to what we just saw on the previous slide in the capital investment piece. Whereas on the right-hand side, where we're looking at global R&D spend for food and beverage manufacturers, you can see that this has actually been growing since 2015. I think the point here to raise is that this leaves Australia at a competitive disadvantage in developing new products and in investing in world-class production facilities and kind of taking the industry through that the growth trajectory, which if we flick to the next slide, we can just remind ourselves as to what our ambitious growth targets are. So a little bit of sobering news in those first couple of slides. Hopefully this is a little bit more positive in terms of what our ambition is. So as I said, as we discussed at the last call, we set ourselves as an industry a really ambitious growth trajectory, looking to double the sector's turnover from $130 billion per year to $250 billion per year over the next 10 years. To do that, we need to focus on a couple of things, and three that I've pulled out specifically for today's call are around investment incentives, a fair and equitable trading relationship, and regulatory reform. So if we just take each one of those individually for a moment, in the investment incentives, it's fair to say that the AFGC continues to look to ways to incentivise the sector by bringing forward investment, by looking at how we can develop up appropriate programs that are really going to help the industry and incentivise the industry to invest. So it was really pleasing to see at the beginning of the year, the government announced the Modern Manufacturing Strategy. That strategy has been developed to help Australian manufacturers to scale up and to become more competitive and more resilient. There were 6 pillars identified by the government, and one of those pillars was food and beverage. Coincidentally, the government is also targeting a doubling of growth for the food and beverage sector over the next 10 years. They're focusing on things like smart manufacturing, food safety, traceability and digitisation, and innovative food and beverage products and product development. And there will be a range of funding available for manufacturers to help articulate and bring this to life. The second one there, the fair and equitable trading relationships. The AFGC conducted a survey during 2021 where we explored the barriers to innovation. And what came through clearly in those results was that the retailer and supplier process for bringing product to market is seen by the industry, by the FMCG industry, as being somewhat problematic. So, this is easy to understand when we think about things like margin expectations or trade-related costs. And those types of elements can have a dampening impact on innovation. So it's really important that at the industry level, we continue to work on developing fair and equitable trading relationships within Australia. And we certainly see the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct as being the cornerstone to do that. And then finally, the final requirement there is to ensure that we have a regulatory system that supports innovation and research and development and doesn't dampen it, but really does, help it grow and develop. And this is really requires us to make sure that we've got a system, a regulatory system that is practical, that it's evidence-based, that it's proportionate, and really quite sensible approach to the way in which we look at our food and grocery products. So that regulatory system really needs to assist the sector rather than dampen the sector. It needs to assist the sector in developing, manufacturing and promoting products that Australians are going to need in their everyday lives. And I think that's a combination of these types of levers at an industry level that is really going to help the sector innovate and invest and move forward.
I realised I was on mute there. There's a lot of things in there. We've had a couple of questions, which hopefully we'll touch on again when we get through to the questions and answers at the end. A lot of themes, some tough messages, yep. I think, in there as well, but also I'd suggest, and I'll look to you, Simon, as well here, this link between some of that challenge and then some of the answer coming from this whole notion around innovation in not just in products, but in its broadest sense, which is really where we're going today. Simon, your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, there's the big, hairy, audacious goal of we can see on the slide in terms of what we want to do. There's the challenge around innovation, but I'd encourage everybody to think about innovation more broadly. As David touched on, it is about product, absolutely, but it's also about mindset, I suppose, from your point of view, suppliers, retailers out there, thinking about how you communicate and reposition existing products in a way that means more to shoppers, to consumers, and makes them think differently, and which obviously is what one of the things we're going to talk about today.
And Sam, thank you. You used to, again, so something Sam said earlier was that she often feels like she brings the bad news, but I think there's a big hairy audacious goal there as well, and something to get after, and that is why we are holding a session like today, because this is a fundamental lever. Now I'm just going to share before I go back to you, Simon, the results from that poll. So where do occasions and mindsets sit in your thinking today? If you're sitting watching this, very few people saying it's not even on their radar. But no matter if it is, and you're in that 2%, then you're in the right place. A few more people saying more relevant to other categories. Interesting, not unreasonable perspective to have. A third of you saying starting to give it some thought, and a very encouraging 57% of you saying that we're on it. It's an extra string to our bow. So I think that's a really interesting outcome. I'm really pleased to see so many in option C and particularly D. And that's what this is about, right? And I'm going to hand over to Simon. He's going to cast your minds back to a different era, a different time in grocery shopping.
Almost needed some music there, didn't we? Yeah, well, I'm getting old now, so I like a bit of nostalgia. So I'm gonna take you all back to the 1980s and encourage you to think about what you were doing in the 1980s, or perhaps you weren't even born in the 1980s, in which case think about your parents and what they were up to. So if we go back over 30 years now, a very clever chap called Dr. Brian Harris came up with the principle of category management as a better way to organise products in store to be relevant to shoppers, but also a better way for retailers and suppliers to do business. And the original 8-step process and the rest is history. But it was a very different time back then. And again, thinking about specifically how you used to shop, or say how perhaps your parents used to shop. It was a bit of an event, wasn't it? I know for us, it was a Saturday afternoon and we get in the car and, once a week, we go to the supermarket and get a massive trolley and sort of stick a load of things in it and then figure out what we were going to do with that for the rest of the week for dinner or for any other occasion we might have. And the point there is shoppers were buying for dinner, but they were buying for dinner in 5 or 6 days' time. And we had big freezers and big pantries and we loaded them up and as I say, relatively infrequent shopping. Now, the world has changed, and gradually over the last 30 years, we've got to the point where we are shopping more often, more frequently, and we're shopping smaller baskets, and we're shopping still for dinner, but for dinner for tonight or for the next day. And what that means is, from a mindset point of view, shoppers are much more specific and fixed, have much more an idea in terms of what they want for tonight's dinner, rather than, it's a concept of 5 days' time, and I'm not quite sure. And so what we're seeing is retailers catching up with that. And what does that look like? So it looks like, for example, from Coles' point of view, meals made easy. Now, it's no surprise to me, anyhow, when Stephen Kane was announced at Coles, he decided to have his photo op right in front of the meals made easy section, because Coles leading here and wanting to champion, as are Woolworths, of course, dinner for tonight. So they are connecting, they are realizing that shoppers are coming in for a meal, and they're saying, rather than give them products in a traditional category management type of way, I'm going to collect meal solutions together in one easy place in store. So very much building a store footprint that delivers to the mindset of the shopper, in this case, occasion. But it doesn't have to be occasion. When we talk about mindset, I think we often go to occasions and missions. It's actually broader than that. So bottom left here, an example of what Woolworths are doing from a health aisle point of view. This isn't an occasion as such, but it is healthy requirements or healthy mindset. And again, it's pulling products from different categories and collecting them in an aisle to say, here is your healthy solution. Come into our store and you can shop this aisle and you know you're going to get something that is a bit better for you and whatever that means to you. But it's not just about food, it's absolutely about non-food as well, because again, it's broader than occasions and needs in that sense. And on the right-hand side here, here's an example of health and beauty, in particular, deodorants, or in this case, men's grooming. This was built on the insight that women were shopping for men in deodorants, going to the fixture, getting very confused in terms of finding things, and saying actually it would be a lot easier if men's grooming products were in one place. And of course it worked for men as well, but we'll talk more about this in our case study in a moment. But the point being, the mindset is, who am I shopping for? So in this case for him, and relaying and resegmenting the aisle and the bay to reflect that. And then the one in the middle, if you're thinking, well, it's really hard to influence store or shelf, perhaps you're a smaller supplier, then you can absolutely influence your own pack, I would hope. And here's an example of a pack from Tesco where the lead message is not that it's a curry or even that it's a takeaway. It's not about the product, it's for two people. The thing that really stands out, it's for two people. So here are all examples of stores, shelves, and when I say shelf, I mean segmentation, signage, and packs that talk directly to the mindset and connects directly to the way people are thinking before they then get to product level. So what does that mean? Because it then challenges our dear old Dr. Brian Harris and his product-led positioning or product-led view of what category management is. So I just wanted to talk quickly to that and say, okay, well is the category management model of 30 years ago still relevant? I know it's moved on from there. I would say it absolutely is. But if we go back 30 years, it was the expectation from a shopper point of view that they would figure out, they would move from their need to actual product. So I want something for dinner, or I want something for lunch. Let's say I want to make lunch. I'm going to go to the bakery to get a roll. I'm going to go to the deli counter to get some sliced ham. I don't know, and I go to the salad bar to get some salad, and that's how I would build my my lunch solution, if you like. So the category execution was very much product led. Now, if we now look at the way shoppers are thinking today in terms of what retailers have moved towards, it's building stores, layouts, building shelves, and building packs or presenting packs to shoppers that talk directly to the need in the way that I've just shown you on the previous slide. So the difference, and then this is a subtlety, but it's really important in terms of our category management thinking, is that I would suggest we need to break out of the confines of product and go broader into the need, into the mindset. And of course, that could pull different categories into your, different products into your universe. So what mindsets does your brand or product or category deliver to? You know, if you're making biscuits, I'd suggest you're not competing with other biscuits, you're competing with other snacking products. If you're making a healthier biscuit, then it's a different universe again, arguably, if you're in the health aisle. And of course, the risk is, if you don't do this, if you're making a meal product and you're not in the meals aisle, or a healthy product, you're not in the healthy aisle, or a men's deodorant that's not in men's grooming in terms of position, then there's a big risk to your business, right? So the old way is simple and it's easy. It's the way things are set up. The new way is harder. It's harder to execute because it's broader. But there is big risk if you don't do it. And I'm talking both to suppliers and retailers here. If, you know, in the world of retailers, if you're a buyer with traditional product structures, it's very difficult for you as a buyer to then go and talk to your peers across, I don't know, might be 10 or 15 other buyers, right, in terms of product, to say, well, how do we work together to construct either a bay or a shelf or an area in store or some sort of solution? That's exactly what Woolworths have done, by the way, with their new buying structure around the health aisle. If you're a supplier, you might say, oh, it's really hard because I've got to talk to lots of different buyers and I'm not quite sure, and I've got a relationship with my guy in biscuits, let's say, but I've got to go to other buyers as well. So I get it, it's hard, but this is where retail is going. And if you overlay the added tension or opportunity that online gives you, you know, arguably it's much easier to present an online solution around mindset. And this is the way shoppers are thinking. It's how they are acting. Can you afford not to do it? So I think, as a summary, think broader than just product. Think store, think shelf, think pack. And the first step in all of that is understand what universe you're in, what mindset does your category or brand sit in.
it's a really interesting kind of flip on traditional thinking, as you said, going all the way back to, was it really in the 80s? God. But it's challenging, certainly for me at least, you might think this as well, to kind of conceptually think about this outside of the confines of the traditional category. And particularly if, as you were saying, Simon, you don't necessarily sit in meals or in health, but it's a very, or something, you know, that you associate more directly with that need state, but it's a very real mindset, and shoppers are in this holistically when they're doing their grocery shopping. We don't, of course, have different brains that we access when we're shopping for different categories. So there's something afoot. I'd really like to, I'm really interested, I'd like to know what your thoughts are out there, get your take on this. If you're sitting in watching this, given how you voted in the first poll, how well do you think we are doing as an industry in terms of responding to these needs? What proportion of these new world needs do you think we are satisfying today? Just stick it in the chat. 25%, 50%, 75%. How well do you think we are doing as an industry? Don't make it personal, but as an industry, how much of this thinking are we satisfying? Stick it in the chat, and let's get a gauge on a perspective of where we are and how much headroom there is. Thank you. 25% from Scott. Neil, 25%. 10, 30, 20. So yeah, I kind of thought that might be where it would sit, in which case there are a lot of, by your own admission, guys, there's a lot of opportunity to tap into more of these needs. And this is where we're going to go next. Commercial gain. Oh, you're still driving, aren't you, Simon? I was like, oh, what am I doing now? So, lesson number 2.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I've talked about the risk of not doing it. I mean, let's flip that round and talk about opportunity, shall we? And this is where it ties in with some of the challenges that Sam was talking to from an industry perspective and also an innovation perspective. And the two things I want to cover here are the volume gain, but also the value and margin gain that's to be had by approaching the shopper mindset and delivering to the shopper mindset in the way we've talked about. So, number 1, what's the volume gain? Are there significant amount of people or shoppers thinking this way when they're shopping? And the answer to that quite simply is yes. So if we take our whole program across grocery, it's all categories, all retailers, and we look on average, 50% of shoppers are shopping for a specific occasion when they're buying something. So not just to throw in the pantry, but specifically for a particular need, such as dinner for tonight. And of course, it's very different by different categories. 60% are shopping with other people in mind. So like the men's grooming example. So they might be shopping for themselves, but they're shopping for partners, for kids, for family or friends, carers, shopping for other people, that sort of thing. You know, it's a large proportion of people that are in this mindset of thinking specific occasion, need, health, that sort of thing, or for who, for him, for her, for the kids. And then the last one here, we haven't really covered that yet, but this is really important as well. I mentioned this a little bit in terms of the sort of 1980s, you know, dinner for 5 days' time rather than dinner for tonight. 36% shopping for today. So it could be immediate, or it could be, as I say, for example, dinner for tonight, or some sort of occasion or usage right now. Now, 36%. I mean, it's a reasonably large number. Big note here, it's much larger out of lockdown. So this includes some of the lockdown figures that we've seen over the last year. It's about 10% higher pre-lockdown. It bounces back very quickly. We saw that in Australia, and we see that in international markets. So this will increase to around 45, 50%. So it's a large proportion of people, significant proportion, shopping specifically to use or consume today. Now, another lens on this, and this is something that we've seen, I saw this in the last few days. It was launched within the last week in the UK. If you went to if you went to Sam's AFGC conference in May, one of the big themes was buying for now, buying for today. We talked about it in liquor. I remember a video, Sam, from the conference where there were 2 guys, I think they were in New York, ordering beer, and it turned up in 3 minutes or something like that. And it's amazing, right? You know, Jimmy Brings exists right now in Australia. You can get your liquor in 30 minutes. Well, guess what Tesco are doing in the UK? You can now order your grocery shop and they will deliver it within 10 minutes. The first order was delivered within 7 minutes of store receiving the order. So this is happening, right? This is happening from a shopper point of view. It's happening from a retailer point of view internationally. It is a very important trend, clearly, with the amount of investment that goes into delivering something like that. Amazing, supply chain and delivery mechanism there to be able to do that and promise that. It's very important. It's here. It's increasing. And particularly now that we're accelerating out of lockdown, will continue to increase. So in other words, hooking in and aligning with the mindset of the shopper is really important. Now, so that's number one. Number two, is there a value story or a premiumization story to be had? So what happens when shoppers are in this mindset, and how do they think differently, and what are they willing to pay, or what brands are they looking for when they're in this sort of mindset? So if you were on the previous webinar, you might remember this slide. It's a measure of all the factors that are important to people. The higher the bar, the more important something is. And now last time we looked at the trend, pre-COVID to now. This time, what the arrows represent are increasing levels of importance if you're in the mindset of shopping for a specific occasion, shopping for somebody else, or a specific person, I should say. It could be yourself, as long as there's a specific person. And the biggest one is shopping for today. So shopping for dinner for tonight is very different shopping for dinner in 5 days' time. And all of these things are more important: quality, Australian, range, offers, sustainability, premium, authenticity, innovation. And in particular, the top three. So these are the biggest differences are around the authenticity of the product. So that's great for strong brands with strong stories. Where's it sourced? How's it made? What's the heritage behind the brand? More willing to buy into those sorts of brands. Innovation, again, linking with what Sam was talking about, the challenge for the industry to do a bit more around new thinking. Could be MPD in terms of products, or could just be something new and different in the way it's presented. For example, the sort of mindset retailing we're talking about here. And the kicker, they are significantly more likely to look at premium tiers of premium brands and willingness to pay more for something that credibly delivers to that mindset or need. So it's not just about risk avoidance in terms of executing to the mindset. It's about genuinely driving volume, because lots of shoppers are already thinking this way. And it's the opportunity to add margin back in, to present premium brands, premium tiers that, as long as they credibly offer that, are something that shoppers are looking for.
Simon, just to jump in, because that slide that we use a lot and we show a lot, particularly when you do what you did just then, which is to isolate the specific behaviours of a subset. That is, and I'm unashamed about this one, but that is one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of looking at it in this way. Because if you're watching the session and you are a guy or a gal that's got to go out and influence a retail partner and get an initiative over the line, the power that you have of being the person who can sit in that room and forensically segment in such detail the different behaviors, and they're manifestly different. This is across all categories. It's layered up across all stores, all categories. So these aren't statistical anomalies, but you can look at it through these lenses and be the person sitting in that room who can present a different vision, a different point of view, something that is going to add that value and is going to help, well, your business towards the doubling of growth over the next 10 years that Sam talks about, but it's also going to put you in a really strong position from a relationship perspective, from a collaboration perspective. And that's something that I think is always worth calling out. So sorry for cutting in there, Simon, but I just wanted to add that. Back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I just wanted to finish on this with some examples. And of course, there are many lists that we could show you around things like health and so on that we've talked about. But I just picked a couple here. Here are the top 10 categories bought in store specifically for my partner. So cough and cold, male toiletries we've touched on. Canned pasta, there you go, who would know? But I suppose that's the point, right? You need to get into your category level to actually understand the mindset of the shopper. It's often a different person to the consumer, and even if it's the same person, it's a different mindset. For lunch, deli meats, I touched on that, rolls, wraps, canned fish, etc. Some obvious ones there perhaps, but again, the point is, what if you're a retailer, what is your store doing to highlight the lunch opportunity. If you're a supplier, how are you having those conversations with retailers in terms of not just the store layout? Remember, we talked about three things: where in store, the shelf segmentation, signage, and then thirdly, the pack. What is your pack doing if you're one of these categories to talk to lunch, or to talk to the fact that it's for him? You know, the takeaway for two example. What's your packaging doing to really land that?
Okay. We've got about 10 minutes to go. Just before we get into third and final part, Sam, one for you to ruminate on. When I asked what proportion of these new mindset opportunities are being accounted for in store, Chris said 10%, and then he said chains potentially are risk averse. And that made me think about your point in terms of R&D and so forth. So I just thought I'd seed that in with you, have a think about that one, come back to you on that one towards the end. And Lucianne said, does the Tesco offer have a limited number of items associated with it? I would imagine so. If you do your like weekly shop, 100 items in inside 10 minutes, so I think it's probably more of a convenience thing, but we'd have to look that one up.
I'm sure it does. I don't know the details, but I'm sure it does.
Well, third and final component, right? We talked about the what the opportunity is. We talked about the real commercial benefits, and now make it real. 3 specific points, 3-point checklist that you can take advantage of, that you can use to bring this to life. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are those 3 things? Well, it's understand, it's influence, and it's lead. So step number 1, understand the occasion and mindset that your categories play to. So what I'm doing here is basically taking you through the journey that we went through with probably, if not the largest, one of the largest suppliers in the deodorants game, with one of the big majors in Australian grocery. This was 5 or 6 years ago now, so it's a while ago. But the category itself was poorly delivered, and shoppers were not that satisfied. So the satisfaction ranking, get my teeth in, ranked number 175th out of 178 categories. So in other words, poor satisfaction from shoppers. We also realized that 1 in 3 shoppers were actually buying for somebody else. So this is the example, and specifically it was older females buying for their partners, their husbands, etc., or their older teenage sons, or an older son in the house, and they were, being told to specifically buy a certain brand, and then they were going out and they were trying to find it, and they couldn't. They're finding it difficult, and their satisfaction was 34% lower than the category level, which is already very low. So, a very clear understanding of the problem, but also the occasion and mindset, in this case, mindset of who I'm buying for, and the sticking point. So step number 1, understand your mindset and your competitive set around that. Step number 2, influence your strategic partners. So again, if you're sitting on supplier side, perhaps you're in category management, you've got to influence your marketing and sales teams. And then, of course, you've got to influence your strategic retail partners as well. If you're a retailer, then you need to, as a buyer, you need to influence your fellow peers in terms of, men's grooming and the example that we talked to before, in terms of pulling different categories into a certain solution for shoppers. Now, in this particular category at the time, this is a couple of things. In talking to shoppers post-strip, we understood what their needs are. So the chart on the left there tells us that actually what's really important to them, this is a version of the slide we saw at aggregate level, what's really important to them was layout and availability, and also special offers. But the bubbles there are the ranking. So it's the 9th most important category in the whole of the store in terms of getting the layout right and getting availability right. Very high ranking in terms of the role that the shelf has, specific and particularly for those shoppers buying for somebody else. And then we can look at the observations in store, in other words, how people are shopping. And we found that these people were shopping in the wrong place. They were expecting their men's roll-on deodorant to be with the other men's roll-on deodorants rather than brand blocked as it was. So there was frustration. There were high dwell times. There were a lot of frustration in terms of going to the wrong place, spending time looking at shelf, and a lot of cases, obviously, either walking away not having bought, or certainly walking away dissatisfied, which has a knock-on effect next time. So step number 2, through credible, objective data, understand where the problem is and use that to influence your strategic partners, whether that's internal or external. And then step number 3, lead, test and learn. Lead your strategic partners, lead the shopper. Here's a better solution. Let's trial it. So the recommendation was taken to retailer A through the supplier. Retailer A accepted it. And then post changes, we saw significant improvement from a satisfaction point of view on layout, on out of stocks, on range. It was the same range. Nothing happened on range. The same products just moved around, and yet impression of range went up. And not only that, we saw value share improve. Value share for the retailer at category level, value share for the brand, both improved significantly. And then again, here's the kicker: the following year, retailer B thought, well, that's a good idea, we should do that, and basically copied the changes as a result of that. So really good example, and particularly in a non-food category where you might think, well, it's not just about meals, right? This is about the mindset of the shopper, understanding the issue, influencing strategic partners, and then leading test and learn trials to improve things for the shopper.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Real straightforward, simple example. Understand it, identify it, and then build a plan to action it. And as you said there at the end, you see the second retailer thinking it's so great that they had to deploy it further down the track as well. So, so perfect. Sam, I'm going to come back to you straight away because there's a couple of things that came up from you. Simon, thank you. I'll go to you again before we wrap up. But a couple of things came up which potentially linked some of the R&D investment challenge that you talked about, and what we're seeing in terms of the opportunity to do more on occasions and be more innovative. So a couple of notions here around the fact, well, is the issue, and this is my question to you, to what extent do you think the issue on R&D and investment in this area is to do with the offshoring that we're seeing in Australia, head offices going overseas, taking the global trends and the global products? If you can give us a quick point of view, and if it is, what do you think the solution is? What's the answer?
So absolutely, I think this is part of why we're seeing that decline, certainly in the R&D side of the spend, not so much in the investment, because you still require manufacturing capacity and smart manufacturing in that area, but definitely in the R&D. There are a couple of risks, however, for that happening. If your R&D is happening offshore, there's a real issue around speed to market. There's a real issue in terms of meeting and matching local trends. There's local tastes. All those things come into play, and it puts a manufacturer at a disadvantage to someone who's here locally and can pivot quite quickly to meet a new trend or a new direction that a retailer may want, a trend from a consumer or a direction that a retailer may want to take them onto. There's also a significant risk for the industry in terms of the more that happens, the more offshoring manufacturing. Once manufacturing goes offshore, it doesn't come back onto shore, which is why we really need to face into that data and look at what we can do to incentivize investment back into Australian manufacturing. And I think that the steps that have been taken in the modern manufacturing strategy and the objective of doubling the size of the industry over 10 years that we have said are really quite critical as part of that process.
Some interesting thoughts there. And just looking at it from a slightly different angle, Simon, I'll put this one to you, because Chris's perspective was around that aversion to change from the industry. That's why we're not seeing, or the risk aversion, I should say. That's why we're only seeing 10, 20, 30%, I think was the highest perspective on the number of opportunities that we're taking around this new thinking. You've got a thought on that? Is that an issue? If it is, what do we do about it? If not?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's human nature, isn't it? To be on the one hand, we all say, oh yeah, it's all about change and I'm going to go in and I'm going to change. On the other hand, we're all a bit scared of change. Look, I think it's a mindset without overplaying that one word. I mean, more than that, it's a requirement. It's a requirement from a shopper point of view now. Can you afford not to? If you're a retailer, you're going to get left behind because other retailers are doing it. If you are a supplier, You know, I'll use the example, you make healthy biscuits, you're not in the health aisle, there's an issue. So there's big opportunities. So yes, risk aversion, it's hard for all the reasons I've said, you know, buying structures, traditional 30 years, 35 years of doing it, as we are, based on a product-led category management mindset. It's hard, but you know, it's our job. It's our job as an industry to change and do this. And I just encourage you to have those conversations. Start the conversation with your retail partners. You know, start somewhere. Take that first step.
Yeah. And there's some good examples, some that you took us through, Simon. So there will be some case studies coming through that will help people, I think, in terms of understand not only the process, but the benefits that they'll get both from, you know, volume and value, as you talked about. You know, the one that strikes me is putting salad dressings with bag salads. You know, it's a very simple thing in a shopper's point of view. Oh, here's my salad, here's my dressing. So a really clever approach, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example, Sam, and it's simple, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's still hard.
It's hard to execute.
It's hard to execute, and I understand that. But you know, it's it really pays off.
Go in with evidence, right? Go in with evidence. That's, I guess, what we're advocating here. Wherever you're getting it from, make sure you go in with that evidence-based view. Quick opportunity for you guys both, to Simon and Nissan, to think about your final thought. While I respond to this final comment, it was Megan that she said, I wonder when retailers will be able to pivot to time of day solutions for shoppers. A few years ago, I was researching Albert Heijn in the Netherlands. I know some of you may have come across Albert Heijn, very, very innovative. And they had a format called Albert Heijn to go. This was probably 2014, 2015. Google it. It was an amazing store in Amsterdam. And I think this was kind of version 2, version 3. And they were doing that. They were switching out breakfast into lunch, into dinner. The whole lighting, the whole ambience of the store changed as they went through the day. You'll still be able to find clips on it. Interestingly, at the time, it became very expensive for them. So that's a good example to track down. Maybe if Simon, Sam, you've heard of anything else around the globe, drop it in, but I will keep going. Otherwise, in the interest of time. So what did we talk about today? 3 things, your 3-point checklist. Execute to the mindset, talk to the need, and that can be done at shelf, store or pack level, or combination of all 3, and explore the different occasion ecosystems for more opportunities. I'll talk about that again in a sec. Think about the mindset and bear in mind that this shopper, to your point, Sam, is looking for innovation, and they will reward that. They are more willing to trade up, as Simon said, into premium options. And this is very clearly, as a lot of you have already identified, bigger than just meal deals. But when all said and done, you need a process, you need a plan. There's a 3-point plan there: understand, influence, and lead. Final thoughts. Your final thought for today, Sam?
Mine comes back to what I started with, is that I just think that what we continue to see in the FMCG sector and the retail supermarket sector is an evolution of the way in which we do business, the products that we bring to market, you know, the processes that we use to do that. And we really need to face into that and really encourage the industry to continue to strive in this space. So really back to my first thing around, you know, the nature of our industry is one of evolution.
Thank you, Sam. We'll see you again in a month. Simon?
I think, you know, think broader than traditional category or product confines. Think mindset in terms of, we talked about store, shelf and pack. And I think the starting point is, you know, do you understand your shopper mindset, not your consumer mindset, your shopper mindset when they're at shelf, shopping for your category, your brand, and importantly, what are the other categories or linked products that fall into that mindset and form the competitive set for that.
Great setup for me, great setup, because last bit of value for you, to 105 of you still on the line. It's fantastic, you stuck around to the end. If you want to find out what categories do coexist around yours in various shopper mindsets, so the ecosystems around your category, to give you those ideas and give you those different angles to go into your retail partners with, then now's your chance to find out. No strings attached, just an opportunity to hear some good value from us. Book your free insights, chat with my colleague Nick or my colleague Nancy, and you'll get a link to do that very soon after today's session. I think we made it. I've had my toes crossed all the way through. I don't think we've had any major technical issues. So Simon, Samantha, thanks again for your time. Thank you to everyone who's been out there. And we'll see you again on the 2nd of December, part 3. This is a big one. E-commerce, omni-channel shoppers. What are they doing? How do you trigger them? How do you win them? Make sure you're there for that one. Take care.